Next, I'd like to turn to David Schultz, who's building the All Nation kit of the Waffle Side boxcar. Remember, All Nation has just come back to life recently because it had been out of the market for some time. So we're happy about that. And Dave, I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Well, thank you, Jim. This is kind of new for me. So if there's any mistakes or if I trip over myself, you'll understand. A little bit about myself. I've been in O-scale for about 40 years. I've met some other people that got me involved in it. So I've built a few kits over the years. This one's kind of interesting. I've never built a 3D printed model before. The filament's a little different. Took me a little bit to get used to it. So we'll share some of this stuff so you guys don't make the same mistakes I did. I had to replace some parts that I broke but it goes together fairly well. So I guess we will start this. Now, like I say, bear with me here if I mess this up, but all right. Can everybody see that? Did that picture come up?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can. We're good.
All right. These are some of the tools. The squares are kind of important for one part of it. Mr. Thompson alluded to making your own out of plywood. So I put those 2 plywood pieces in there, or you can use solid wood, whichever. That works perfectly fine too. I've got other types of squares. The Zap-A-Gap, of course, works really well with this filament. So that's the glue I've been using. John includes in the kit a piece of parchment paper, but I also use the wax paper that comes on a lot of those stickers you get from different outfits, with your address labels and stuff. That works really well for this also, but it'll help keep the, when you hold the parts together, it'll keep them from gluing to your mat. And the Dremel, of course, will come in handy for some things, or you can just use the chisel blade, but we'll go over that as we come to it. I still use this trusty old sander. This filament tends to melt if you go too fast. You got to go fairly slow with it as you're sanding it. Even with I've got one of the automation sanders, and if you go fast with that, you will heat the stuff up and then you'll just get kind of a gooey mess. But I like to fall back on this one because the parts on these are rather big. So these come in handy. There's my the automation sander. It's been a very handy tool. And these kind of clamps I got from Micromark. These come in handy for putting the sides in place. You'll have to come up with some clamps because the stretch across between the floor and the wall, you're talking about 2 or 3 inches. So if you guys, whatever clamps you have, that'll help hold it all together. So those are handy. And then I'm assuming if you're like me, over 60, you're going to need a whole bunch of these too. So different varying degrees of. I also have a jeweler's loop. So if I really have to get picky, I can get out the jeweler's loop and get in real close. But anyway, the floor pieces. This is the first start of this. You have to find the 2 floor pieces. John has pretty much got the stuff separated out in separate bags, and the 2 floor pieces, and it comes with a little biscuit. So kind of like in woodworking, they make those little biscuits that you put in there. There's a slot on the end, and you'll have to do a little clean out. I'll show that a little later. Where my little chevron pointer is pointing to are these ribs are very delicate. If you try to push the floor together with your thumbs up against those, you'll break them off. That is experience talking there. But luckily they glue back on fairly easy, but try to avoid putting pressure on those because they will break off. And here's a real simple, for truing up the ends. I just have wood blocks that are square, and I'll put self-adhesive sandpaper on them, and I'll lay the floor on the mat and put the block on the tabletop and then just slide it back and forth gently. You can do it that way, or you can do it with the true sanders. But if you don't have those kinds of things, this works fairly well too. But I've got like 100 grit paper in there, and that'll true up those ends. Sometimes there's a little bleed off on the ends from the printing that need to be taken care of. That works pretty well. There I am using the true sander, and it'll clean up it. If you put the ends together without doing this, you'll see there'll be little gaps here and there. So you do need to clean up the parts a little bit. And then the slot in the end, I found that on one of the first kit I built, it wasn't a problem. But this one here, the slot had closed in a little bit. So I took the Dremel on the slowest speed and I went down through there and cleared that out. But you're going to have to go in with like a razor saw and clear out, because it doesn't really cut, it melts. But it's not too big a problem. Go in there with your razor saw and kind of clean it out. But you just keep working at it until you get the biscuit to fit in there. There's the biscuit. I like to modify the biscuit a little bit. You know, it doesn't have to be that square piece that you get originally. You can trim it up, make it, you know, biscuit shaped if you want, like a woodworking type biscuit. So I tend to, you know, I cleaned out the slot as best I could, but the ends, of course, got rounded from the Dremel tool. So I just rounded the ends of the biscuit so that the biscuit would fit in there, and then simply put a little super glue on both halves, and voila, put it together. And you'll have to push from the ends. Don't push from those the ribs on the sides there. Like I said, they will snap off, but you can just push on the end. You can work a little bit, and then you want to have some kind of straight edge to make sure your floor stays straight. Now I just used my tabletop and put it down on the tabletop, and made sure that the ends were even across. And once the super glue sets up, you've got your floor put together. Then we move to the sides, and a lot of this is just going to be homework for you guys, the ones that are following along here. You've got to clean all the sides. There's 4 pieces, a right and a left, and then right and a left of one side of the car, and then a right and a left for the other side. If you flip it over, you'll see that this line where the pointer is pointing is where the floor is going to attach. So all of this peels off of here, which is kind of unusual. When I first saw the kit, I wasn't sure where to go with this, but that does remove. And then underneath that, you're going to find these little tabs, which are the support tabs for the printing process. Well, once again, you'll either have to use the chisel blade and go in there and remove those little tabs, or you can use your Dremel, but it'll melt. But I've done both. Both work. The chisel blade works well, but you got to stay clear. You'll get yourself cut with the chisel blade if you slip. And there it is, cleaned up, ready to go. Now, right down in that lower corner, and I think I have a picture here pointing to it, there's a little dip. I'm not sure what that is, but I take that out of there. And I think, yeah, anyway, there's a little dip here in the bottom corner. You've got a straight edge that goes from one end of the car to almost the other, and then there's that little part hanging down there. That I remove. Take a razor saw or whatever and just remove that. It's not hard. And then you might notice at the bottom, when you clean all this up, that you can see through the car. This is not going to be an issue because the floor glues in there, and once the car is painted, you'd never know that was there. But the first time I saw that, I kind of panicked and thought I'd gone too deep. But it really hasn't. It will be covered up, so it's not a problem that way. Then I like to remove the grab irons. These have solid grab irons. It's a copy of what Walthers had done. And so John just 3D printed the car as he originally got it. And that's fine. If you guys don't want to remove them, you don't have to. But I take a chisel blade and I'll cut on the one side first. And then I chop the other side down. And then I go through and remove the grab iron. And we'll replace these with wire. And then I'll show that here in a little bit. But then we'll replace these grabs with wire. It'll give the model a much finer look. Then what I'll do is after I chisel those out of there, I use the round blade, the X-Acto round blades, and you can just lightly scrape on the car and remove that stuff right down to the car side itself. It's really amazing how smooth you can get it with those chisel blades. It also works on, you can see a little bit of this spider webbing that goes on. You can go around with that curved blade and remove some of that spider webbing and clean up some of the waffles, if that's a problem. Mine were pretty good. This one here you can see has a little bit of dimples in it, but you can go through and put a little Bondo on there if you have to. But I think that was the only one that I had that had a little bit of a deformity to it. Then we take our drill, and I've got a 30 thousandths drill bit that I put in there. This 30 thousandths in O scales is a 1.5 inch thick grab iron, which is kind of standard for the railroads. Used to be 1 inch, but that tend to be a little light. So they went to 1.5 inches. And then I think on the locomotives, it's 2 inch for the grab irons on the locomotives. So anyway, 30 thousandths, and you can still see the ghost from the old grab iron, which I used to line up my drill bits so I could get all the holes lined across. And you also had the ghosts from the nut bolt washer that was there originally too. So I just drilled where those originally were. Yeah, there I'm pointing. I got that picture out of order. But anyway, I'm pointing to that little dip in there that needs to be taken out. There's the side all cleaned up, holes drilled, ready to go. This is something you guys will have to work on for this next coming week. Like I said, there's a lot of cleanup on these parts. Then the end pieces. You can see here I broke off one of the tabs where the crossover platform will mount. Well, not too hard to find a piece of 60 by 80 thousandths styrene and glue it back in there. I use a wire brush to clean these parts up. It's kind of amazing. It works really well for taking that spider web type stuff off of there. And you can be fairly aggressive with it, but these little tabs that are sticking up, if you get a little too aggressive, you'll get what I got right there. Snap one of those off, and when they go flying, there's no finding them. So I just take a piece of styrene, I glue it in there to replace it. But if you're careful going around those parts, you won't have to do what I did. But that's how you clean up the sides. You'll make them look good. You'll have to clean up some of the flashing around the edges, which any kind of sanding block that you have, you'll clean all the flashing off of there. And then here's one problem you'll have to take care of. That piece that the pointer is pointing to is a little thick. There's a groove in the end. You can kind of see where the floor is going to fit into. Well, that piece that the pointer is pointing to runs into the center sill. So what you're going to have to do is cut away a little bit of the center sill. Now, originally on the first car I built, I ground down that hanger piece, but I didn't like the look of it after I got done. It was too thin. So instead, I'm going to cut away a little bit of the center sill to make sure this part will fit and will fit squarely like this. You can see the floor is put into the notch. The end is square, and that hanger now fits in there because you'll have to, whatever you want to use, you can use the Dremel again if you want to cut that away that way, or you can use the chisel blade and just work at cutting it away. But just keep fitting the part until that fits in there. We'll worry about gluing this stuff later. Yeah, that's just another shot of the end cleaned up with the, there's the wire brush that I was using, a little brass wire brush. And amazingly enough, that'll clean those up. And this stuff is fairly tough. It holds up very well. You'd think that would scratch it, but it doesn't. It's amazing. But it'll clean up all of this little spider webbing that you see on there. And then you see the one little piece that broke off up there. And that was being a little too aggressive, but we got her cleaned up. And then these are the two pieces that'll fit the walls together. The car sides will mount into this. And once again, you'll have to do some cleanup, a little bit of flashing here and there. Some of it is support for the 3D printing. That stuff will have to be cut off and cleaned up. And I think, yeah, there it is cleaned up. The one on the bottom is cleaned up. The one on top is not. So you'll have to get that. And then the sides will glue into these, and we'll do that next week. So that is as far as this goes for this week. You guys got your homework cut out for you. A lot of cleaning, a lot of sanding. Next week, we will start gluing the sides together. We'll put the ends on the floor. And by the end of next week, we should have a fairly decent looking car. So I'll turn it back to you, Jim.